This story is a typical Homeric plot, complete with cannibalism and curses coming back to the murderers. The chorus says it all, and yet the image may remain of some likeliness of a bird whose form can be constructed from the bones of a young boy. The bones of any normal human are just too heavy to accommodate such necromancy, let alone flight. However, it is now being declassified that the strange and dark fairy tale has Justice Grimm written all over it, from the macabre story plot devices to the swift and fitting justice served at the end of the story. Summarize: the mother is crushed, but Marianne and the dad are curiously rewarded with gold. Now, if you know the brothers Grimm, you'd think this is another morality story. But what has been leaded by a couple former agents has stirred the public to becoming aware of the existence of Central Justice Ministry. And while no invasive or overly noisy investigations have come as a result, it's only a matter of time before people make the connections. In the past, we have had what can be described as fan fiction that has worked as this information, and has complicated some of our ongoing projects, so by disclosing some of the information on record, we have effectively beat anyone to the punch. That's just the fun we have up there at the Intel Division. My visit to the Archive of Social Engineering brought me to the attention of a record keeper who was a big fan of the series. She opened up access to everything that I needed to put the elements together and craft this narrative. The archive sat down with me during my research. She wanted to do an interview on the record, practically begged me. The interview was transcribed verbatim below. Note: the archive's name has been redacted, but not to be so SCP for once. I'm going to use her code name.
Okay, so the juniper tree was my absolute obsession for the longest time. You would not believe how many threads connect to that case, and I'm willing to bet most of those connections lead back to more than one of the stories that you've already published. But I wouldn't start writing any sequels, though. Okay, you gotta promise me that no more sequels, not yet.
I'll keep that under advisement so you know all there is to know about the juniper tree story. Before you go disclosing the juicy details, my readers may need to have some sort of authentication. I'm sure you as reader understand, and not your life story, but for word count's sake, take me back to, let's say, the first time you heard the story. I was actually told the story from the orators, so I don't know if that changes it for the individual reader. But if it does, then, for literary consistency, I gotta ask. Who told it to you?
Yes, that's a great question. And that's probably why you're the best. Your questions are so cutting, like razor blades of truth-seeking laser-like focus. Sorry, I got excited there. And just like you, I heard it from the orators when I was old enough to comprehend the story of that caliber. We all heard the chorus differently in our heads, unless you were lucky enough to land a lead role in one of the dramatizations. Some things should not be made into stage plays, but I digress. My first impression as a little child was, of course, utter shock and horror. I don't think I've ever told anyone this, but I had nightmares about it. And no, I'm not going to describe them because we would be here all night long.
Hey, you know I had to spend 3 days and nights trying to get Daffy Duck to spill the beans on the poaching racket. I'm nothing if not patient, despite not getting that duck to quack, so I'm even numb to disappointment and letdown. If I was to be stuck in archives with anyone, I'd rather be stuck with someone who knows securities rounds and the code to shut off the alarms. I know you were using hyperbole, but promised me a good time and all that. Sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. Please continue. So the standard Grimm noir indoctrination.
It's all substandard if you ask me. Specifically, those weird, twisted fairy tales. And now that our presentations to the public are usually stuffed with magic nonsense and wishful thinking to anyone first hearing the juniper tree, that's what it would seem like, a vengeance plot from the grave. But of course, the story needs no fluff or enchantment. That's the way that we operate. The science used is explained away cleverly as magic to act as the ultimate cover story for Justice Grimm. For your reader's sake, I'm going to give them the story as I remember it, the way it was first told me. And believe it or not, the name of the boy in the story is not Hansel, and I'm sorry if that statement is offensive to those that do all that outreach to the poor under his name. But it's just as likely the real Hansel of renown used the chorus from the Grimm noir to preach his ministry, blah blah blah. You know the rest.
Yeah, this is not something I would publish for the state cult. If security doesn't redact a majority of this, I'll be surprised. And I'll be happy, of course. And don't worry about saying Hansel. My readers are not yet briefed on the importance of the political atmosphere of our empire. I'd like to think that even the readers that are aware of Hansel's religious revolution in storytelling will be robustly intellectual and won't take us to church to sue us for slander, etc. I don't know about you, but I was raised a gooseling.
Same here for sure. Ants Go Marching was always playing every Thursday morning at my house. Up to me being in Justice Grimm, I would be lucky to have a conversation with a family member that doesn't begin with, so you stare into the abyss and keep it from looking back at you for a living, and there's only so many times I can talk about it to their pacification. Anyway, I digress. Franz and Marianne, his sister, were playing one day, and Franz was being disobedient by not coming when called. Franz's mother loses her patience and instructs Marianne to take an iron cooking pot and to smack Franz to get him to obey. There are whole sermons made on how Marianne did it, but whatever she did, her blow crushed Franz's skull and the boy died instantly. Marianne returned and told her mother. Now, at this time, there was what history calls the Great Famine, and food was rare to find. This convinced Marianne's mother to make Franz into a stew. And when the father came home from hunting, he did not want to eat until his son was present. But his wife told her husband that Franz was away with his friends, or as the Hanslites tell it, he went on a pilgrimage to Rome. The mother encouraged the father to eat, and so he did. He ate the whole serving. Marianne then gathers all the bones from her brother's consumed cadaver and wrapped them in a silver blanket or quilt, then placed the bones under a juniper tree. When the sun rose the next morning, Franz was now a beautiful silver bird. It's a gold bird if you're a Gosling fundamentalist, by the way. Franz then flies across the countryside, comes to Merchant. Franz begins to sing the chorus. The merchant asks Franz to sing the chorus again, but Franz only does so after trading for a golden necklace. Franz then repeats that same chorus to acquire more gold and lastly, a millstone. Returning to his home, his sister sees the bird and says, "Look what a pretty bird," and Franz gives her a golden necklace. His father is also given some gold. But when his mother takes a step outside the house to receive her gift, she is crushed by the millstone. Now, depending on your interreligious discipline, the boy is restored by a witch or is unceremoniously captured, plucked, and cooked again by his hungry family.
Wow, okay, now I gotta tell you. I wasn't aware of so many alternative endings, especially not a really brutal ending to an already spooky tale. I have heard versions of that story my whole life, but this is the first time that I've been made aware of the ending. It makes sense though, most all the stories in what we would call our religious text have been extracted and watered down, been twisted to a modern scene through a glass darkly paradigm. The end result of which is what I've been attempting to do with this whole series. But it's my turn to digress now. Please continue. This is after all what we've been waiting for. The magic trick explained. The creature's mask is exposed. The truth sets us free, blah blah blah.
Yeah, this is kind of like finally starting to set in that I'm going to be one of your obscure Monster of the Week style interviews. And knowing that the rest of the public is going to be told what we have been keeping secret for so long. Right, the fairy tale, the juniper tree, ahem, poor Franz, we all feel sorry for him because he was eaten. So let's take it from scene 1, act 1, all over again. The dishonest, stupid young male stereotype that the boatman had been targeting for all those years. It can't be stressed that such behavior has various levels of consequences. So you would be led to think that blunt force trauma was an acceptable form of punishment, resulting from stubbornness and lack of respect. Let's also not forget that it is his sister who is only following orders, but ultimately is the one that manages to kill friends with one swing of a cooking pot. Well, here's what we know as far as events that brought about the first act of the juniper tree. From a contextual point of view, this all takes place during that great famine, so imagine growing up hungry. This malnutrition explains the behavior to a point. Obviously, cannibalism is often committed as a last resort of desperation, so it's not unlikely that this actually occurred. It's historical, in fact. I'm hogging the mic, aren't I? Any thoughts so far?
This is your interview agent record, but I know what you're doing. It'll help break up the dissection of the story's facts if I play the hecklefish or the foxmolder or the samwise, the comic relief, the goofball, the class clown, sorry, moving on. So Franz wasn't his name, or at least that's what we suspect. It was an alias, possibly even just a bad translation, but either way he was not Hansel, he was no prince. He was not Tom Thumb, he was not a witch's thrall, and he was not an imp like Rupert Murdoch. I mean, who was that again?
It's Rumpelstiltskin, dear, and absolutely you're right. This boy is one of the Grimm saints, who is unnamed and would have remained so if the Hands of Hanslights hadn't tried to annex the whole story. But by the time the truth was known, everyone called the boy Hans for short, but there had to be a change due to the ministries conflicting with the zealous redraft manuscripts. Franz became the substitute. In my mind, the name is not important at all. For that matter, neither is the fact that he was defiant. The tragedy of the Juniper Tree Chorus is contained within the truce, but it does not make the lies that bodyguard those truce any less terrifying. And really, that's the whole point of a fairy tale, right? I mean, what do I know? I'm just an archivist for justice, Grimm.
That would suggest, if I'm not mistaken, that the events concerning the Juniper Tree happened but did not happen to Franz sequentially. That was one of the supporting arguments from the revisionists during the redrafting. The archetype only seems to have emerged recently now, as more stories are written, or rather rewritten as the case may often be. But come on, ancient record, we both know that the story is a profound allegory that defines the modus operandi of Justice Grimm, albeit very dramatically. So why don't we just talk absolute facts, the disclosure you and my readers will shortly be briefed on. I've done what I can to set the scene, but imagination paints pictures only for so long. Attention spans, you know.
You got it, Agent Gold. At this point, I don't even you could stop me from spilling the beans. And you would be foolish to try. Because, oh god, the truth about, well, here goes the silver blanket, was the code name for a Black Ops necromancy project done by the Restoration Ministry. The research and experiments done by the Silver Blanket Project were real, and they actually happened. Well, sort of a lot like the skull thing, the nutcracker that Punishment Corps uses to read the impressions on the brains of subjects who have or are about to perish. They use MRI tech these days, but back in the Restoration Ministry days, they had forensic teams investigating everything. These were the top necromancer Jesuits, the grumpiest of the grumpiest, but that made them the most learned and most qualified. It was this precursor to the centralized justice ministry that hides behind the whole story. You're right. Do you want to guess as to what the Silver Quilt Initiative was?
If I had to make an educated guest adventure, that the Silver Blanket Quilt Project gathered bones left by the planted agents that would be collected, and then analyzed bone cell by bone cell, and that data would be logged in a profile would be opened. They didn't miss anything back then, and all they had to do was investigate bones. They could tell you the kind of life a person had led and such. A kind of sorcery that predates, if not, supersedes the scientific method as we know it. Aesop's philosophy stuff. Was that close?
Well, do you know who those bone analysis experts were? Well, don't think too hard, because almost no one knows that those sorcerers of Aesop philosophy were actually dogs. Well, very unique dogs. A family, in fact, that had been bred by those grumpy but overqualified Jesuits for that very purpose. They were to serve all of their lives, and most of those super snoops would be adopted out if they had to be retired. If you recall, Chief from the Fox and the Hound was one of them. I could go on and on, all the way up to Bluey even. I'm actually impressed that you know to connect this with the Aesops. Now imagine the insight those dogs could inform the Restoration Ministry with. They virtually never failed to solve the cases, and all they needed was to be given a bone. Oh, okay, hey, I think that the bats want to do the last page, so I'm going to sum up the good points. The Realm of the Coin did their thing and minted gold coins, as well as customized jewelry pieces for the confidential inform, who would eventually become you guys over there in the Intel division. That would lead to the punishment divisions, and even the Department of Execution. They seem to have a really spooky job for a bunch of nerds with oddly sublime imaginations. For capital punishment. Case in point, the millstone that smashes the mother, even though the sister swung the pot and the father consumed the boy. And I'm sure all gooselings are taught before enrolling into the academy that it is only the truly guilty that deserve justice, and that some people turn out are far guiltier than others. That's the morale from the juniper tree, at least I think it is anyway.
Thanks again, Agent Record. I'll be sure to pay weight. Am I being sidelined by the need-to-know bats?
Sidelined, yeah, that isn't the word you wanted to use, was it?
I'm impressed you picked up on that.
I am a librarian of sorts. Reading things is my line of work.